She was already walking away when he said it. "You don't even know my name." Queen stopped. Not because the words scared her, not because the hallway of the Hanwha Grand went quiet, which it did, every sequined neck in the corridor craning toward the sound of a man's voice breaking at its own edges. She stopped because she had heard that tone before. Not from rich men, not from powerful men, from men who were slowly being eaten alive by the lives built for them. She had heard it in her own father's voice once, the night he sold the restaurant, the night he said, "It's fine, while his hands shook over the deed. She turned around. He was standing near the pillar at the end of the corridor, tall, sharp-jawed, wearing a suit that cost more than her monthly rent, and he looked absolutely, devastatingly lost. Not confused. Lost. The way a person looks when they've been somewhere so long, they've forgotten they can leave. "Park Jun," she said quietly. His eyes widened, just slightly. "You know who I am. Everyone in this building knows who you are." She tilted her head. "That wasn't what you meant." The silence that followed was not comfortable. It was the kind that strips people bare if they stay in it long enough. June stayed in it. So did she. And in that silence, something passed between them. Something unspoken, unbidden, and entirely too real for a hotel corridor at 11:45 on a Thursday night. "I meant..." He dropped his voice lower. The performance drained out of it completely. "That you danced with me tonight, like I was just a person." Queen held his gaze. "You are just a person." He almost smiled. Almost. Now his eyes did something complicated instead, something that looked dangerously close to relief. And then the elevator at the end of the corridor opened, and two men in dark suits stepped out, their eyes sweeping the hall with the practiced efficiency of people paid to prevent exactly the kind of moment currently happening. June straightened. The person she'd been talking to disappeared. The heir returned. "Good night," he said, and walked toward the men who were not his friends, but his walls. Queen watched him go. She pressed the card he'd slipped into her hand during their dance, small, cream white, embossed, between two fingers, and felt the weight of it. She should have dropped it in the nearest bin. She didn't. If this story already has you, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Welcome to Afro-Korean Stories TV, where love has no borders, and every story we tell is proof. Subscribe if you believe that connection doesn't need permission. Drop a comment and tell us, have you ever felt seen by a complete stranger? Now stay close. We're just getting started. Queen Adaeze. Okafor had not come to Seoul to fall in love. She had come because the grant existed, because her dance therapy program had been noticed by the Korean Arts and Wellness Foundation, because Lagos had recently done something to her heart that she wasn't ready to name yet. She had come with 2 suitcases, a carry-on full of notebooks, and the particular kind of determination that belongs to women who have already survived things they never talk about. She was 28 years old, and she had built her studio from nothing, a rented room above a pharmacy in Yaba, 12 students, no heating in the Harmattan months, and a reputation that had somehow crossed oceans before she did. The foundation had called it groundbreaking. Her mother had called it reckless. Her ex, David, had called it running away, which was rich, coming from a man who had spent 3 years running toward other women while smiling at her across dinner. Seoul was not running away. Seoul was a deliberate step forward, one she had taken alone, in heels that cost her 3 weeks of savings, into the Hanwha Foundation's annual arts gala, where she was supposed to demonstrate a 3-minute dance piece, shake 12 hands, and go home to her rented apartment in Mapogu. She had done all of that, and then, somehow, she had also danced with Park Jun. And she stood in her apartment that night and looked at his card. Park Jun. No title, no company name. Just a phone number and 2 Korean characters she couldn't read. She photographed it. She sent the image to Amanda. Amanda's response came within 40 seconds, which meant she had been awake and waiting. Queen, that's the Park family crest, as in Park Dante, as in the man who owns 3 banks, 2 media houses, and enough political influence to make presidents nervous. Queen, Queen, why do you have his son's personal card? Queen put the phone face down on the counter. She made herself a cup of ginger tea. She sat by the window and watched the Han River lights blur in the distance, and told herself, very firmly, that she was not going to call that number. She fell asleep holding the card. Oh, Amanda. Amanda Mensah had been Queen's best friend since secondary school in Accra, since the day 11-year-old Amanda had stood up in the middle of assembly and told the vice principal that his reading of the term's top scores was incorrect, then proved it, then sat down smoothly while the whole hall held its breath. She was precise and protective, and she laughed like something was always slightly on fire. And she had followed Queen to Lagos, then to the grant application, and now to Seoul, because Queen's life, Amanda had once said, was simply the most interesting one available. Amanda was also the person who knocked on Queen's apartment door at 7 a.m., 2 days after the gala, with a laptop, 2 iced Americanos, and a look on her face that said she had been researching. "Sit down," Amanda said. "It's my apartment." "Sit down, Queen." She sat. Amanda opened the laptop. Park June, 24 years old, only son of Park Dante and the late Park Soo-yeon. Studied business at Yonsei under conditions that, reading between official lines, suggest he was placed there rather than chose to go. He has almost no public presence, no interviews, no social media. His father's name comes up in every search result connected to him, like June doesn't exist as an individual, only as an extension. Queen wrapped both hands around her cup. "Amanda, there's more. I know there's more. A black sedan has been parked outside this building since yesterday morning." Amanda turned the laptop around to show a screenshot from the building's exterior camera feed. "I asked the building manager. He said a private security firm registered a vehicle to this address 2 days ago, the same day your name appeared in the gala's published guest list." The tea was suddenly very important to look at. "He had you surveilled," Amanda said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a fact laid down gently, the way Amanda placed all her hardest truths. "Before you even called him." "I haven't called him." "But you haven't thrown away the card." Queen said nothing. Amanda closed the laptop. For a moment they sat in the particular silence that belongs only to people who know each other well enough to say everything without speaking. "I'm not telling you to run," Amanda said finally. "I'm telling you to walk in with your eyes open, because I've seen how that family operates. And I've also seen the way you looked when you came home from that gala." She paused. "You looked like someone who'd been given air, after a long time of not breathing." Queen looked up. "Just be careful," Amanda said. "With him, with yourself." She called the number that afternoon. The call. He answered on the second ring. "I wasn't sure you'd call," June said. No preamble, no pretense of being surprised. "I wasn't sure either," Queen said. "I want to ask you something directly." "Okay." "Did you have me surveilled before I called you?" A pause. Not guilt, consideration. "Yes," he said. "Why?" "Because my father's people do it automatically for anyone I make contact with. I didn't order it, but I also didn't stop it. And that's the same thing. I'm sorry." She had expected deflection. But the honesty landed differently. Not as a tactic, but as a genuine, somewhat unpracticed thing. Like a man trying on a behavior he hadn't been taught. "I run a dance therapy studio," she said. "I came here on a grant. I don't have ties to anything dangerous, and I don't need the kind of attention your family brings." "I know," he said. I read your foundation profile, your work with sensory processing disorders through movement. It's remarkable. Queen blinked. You read my foundation profile. 3 times. A beat. I want to take lessons. She laughed, one short, incredulous sound. Lessons. Proper ones. I know what we did at the gala wasn't real dancing. I want to learn, not because it looks good, not because my father wants me to, not because there's an agenda. I want to learn because the 3 minutes I spent dancing with you were the quietest 3 minutes I've had in 4 years. The city moved below her window. A bus turned the corner. A child on the opposite sidewalk dropped something and ran back for it. Come Thursday, Queen said. 7 p.m. Don't bring security inside. I'll text you the studio address. Thank you, he said. Just that. Thank you. Like it meant something enormous. She hung up and stood very still in the middle of her apartment and wondered what she had just walked herself into. Thursday. He came alone. Or as alone as Park Jun was apparently permitted to be, which meant his security detail parked outside and stayed there, and he walked in through the door of her studio like a person practicing the art of existing without a wall around them. That the studio was not what he expected. She could see it on his face. The warm light, the scuffed wooden floors, the hand-painted mural on the far wall. Children and adults in movement, rendered in colors so vivid they seemed to breathe. The smell of eucalyptus and old timber, no mirrors except one long panel near the bar, music playing low, something instrumental, West African strings braided with something softer, possibly a gayagiyam. You mixed the music, he said, stopping near the speaker. I always mix the music. Sit down, take off your shoes. He looked at his shoes. He sat down. He took them off. He placed them side by side with an exactness that told her something. She filed it away. She handed him water. She sat across from him on the floor, cross-legged, direct. Before we move, we talk, she said. I need to understand how you experience your body, where you hold tension, what kinds of sounds, textures, or environments overstimulate you. I need to know this before I ask anything of you physically, because the way I teach is not about performance. It's about awareness. He stared at her. No one has ever asked me those questions. I know. Answer them anyway. He did. Slowly at first. The loud environments, the way applause felt like pressure against his skull, the fact that he processed spoken instructions differently in groups versus one-on-one, the years of assuming something was wrong with him versus the last 2 years of quietly suspecting there was simply a different name for the way his brain worked, a name no one in his family had ever tried to learn. Queen listened. She didn't nod performatively. She didn't look at him with that particular brand of pity that said, "Oh, you poor, complicated creature." She just listened with the focused attentiveness of someone who had spent years learning that the body tells truths the voice is too guarded to say. When he finished, she said, "Okay, stand up. We start from zero. From zero. From zero. Your father's name does not live in this room. Your history does not live in this room. The only thing that exists here is what your body knows and what it's trying to learn. Understood?" He stood. He nodded. And then he did something she didn't expect. He exhaled, long, slow, and complete, like a man who had been holding something so long he'd forgotten he was holding it. She put her hand on his left shoulder. Feel that. That's where you carry it. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. I know. We're going to put it down, she said. Not forever, just for the next hour. You can pick it back up at the door on your way out, if you want. He almost smiled again, and this time, it made it all the way. 3 weeks in. The lessons had a shape now. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 to 8:30. He was a disciplined student, not naturally graceful but deeply attentive, and what he lacked in fluidity, He made up for in patient precision. He improved faster than she expected. She told him so. "My father would say I improved despite myself," he said one Thursday, sitting on the floor with a water bottle, his hair damp from the warmth of the room. "Your father has never watched you learn anything without expecting it to be a performance," Queen said. June looked at her. "How do you know that?" "Because you practice differently when you think I'm watching than when you think I'm not. You're freer when you believe my attention is elsewhere. You take risks. You experiment. The moment you feel observed, you shrink." The silence that followed had weight to it. Recognition. "He's watching everything," June said. Not as a complaint, just a fact. Stated simply, the way people state facts they've long since made peace with carrying. "I know," she said. "The car is always out front." "It's not just the car." He turned the water bottle in his hands. "He had someone pull your lease agreement. He knows the landlord here is 3 months from a rent review. He knows your grant funding runs until April." He paused. "I didn't ask him to do any of that. But he tells me these things to make sure I understand that he can remove whatever he wants to remove." Queen felt the information land in her body, cool, clarifying. She kept her face still. "And you're telling me this because you deserve to know what you're in the middle of?" He looked up. "Because I don't want to be the person who lets you walk into something blind." She studied him. "Is he going to pull the lease?" "Not yet. Not while he thinks surveillance is enough to keep him informed." His jaw tightened. "He's waiting to see if you become a problem." "And what makes a woman like me a problem? In your father's world?" June met her eyes. And the thing that moved across his face then was not embarrassment. It was something older and more painful, the expression of a man who has known the answer to a question for a long time and hated it. "Influence," he said quietly. "He thinks anyone who gets close to me is either trying to use me or trying to change me, and he can't decide which is worse." Queen stood. She walked to the speaker and changed the track. Something slower with a cello buried in it. "Which do you think I'm doing?" June didn't answer immediately. He watched her stand at the speaker with her back half turned to him, and he thought about the Thursday 3 weeks ago when she had put her hand on his shoulder and told him he didn't have to carry it for the next hour. He thought about how he had driven home afterward and sat in the car for 11 minutes before going inside, just to hold the feeling a little longer. Neither," he said. "I think you're just being honest, and I don't have a category for that." She turned. She extended her hand. "Then let's dance." November. He was in the studio on a cold Tuesday in November when his phone lit up with his father's name for the 4th time in 20 minutes. Queen saw it. He watched her see it. He watched it ring out. "You should answer that," she said. "Not in here." "June, not in here." His voice was even, not angry, decided. "This is the 1 hour I have that is mine. Please." She nodded. She turned the music back up. He was almost at the door at the end of the session, shoes back on, jacket collected, when she said, "He's going to escalate." June stopped. "I know." "He's not going to keep using the car and the lease review as soft pressure indefinitely. At some point, he's going to want to do this face to face." "I know." "I want you to know," she said carefully, "that when that happens, I'm not going to disappear. I'm also not going to pretend I'm not scared, but I'm not going to disappear." He stood with his hand on the doorframe and looked at her across the warm, scuffed width of the studio, and he felt something shift in his chest with the particular permanence of tectonic plates. "Why not?" he asked. "Most people do." "Because," Queen said, "I've met people who need a place to breathe, and I refuse to be the person who takes that away." He left without another word. But at the bottom of the stairs, he pressed 2 fingers briefly against the side of the building wall. a small private gesture, like touching something real to confirm it exists. Amanda, I, watching from the window of the coffee shop across the street, photographed none of it. Some things she'd decided deserved to happen without being recorded. The meeting with Dante. The meeting happened on a Wednesday. Not at his offices, not at his home. At a private dining room on the 37th floor of a tower in Gangnam. A room with no name on any public register. The kind of room that existed precisely because the people who used it preferred their conversations to be unverifiable. Queen arrived 11 minutes early. She wore deep rust, a deliberately unfussy, unapologetically visible dress. She wore the earrings her grandmother had given her. She carried nothing but her phone and her keys. Dante was already there. Park Dante in photographs was imposing. In person, he was something else entirely. He was the kind of man who made a room smaller simply by being in it, not through noise or aggression, but through the absolute stillness of a person who has never in living memory needed to prove anything. He was 61. He had his son's jaw and none of his son's softness. And he sat at the table with the ease of a man who had choreographed the entire encounter before she'd boarded the elevator. "Miss Okafor," he said, "please, sit down." She sat. She did not thank him for the invitation. A server appeared with tea. Neither of them touched it. "You're direct," he said, studying her the way a person studies something they have already decided is less than they expected, and are now recalibrating around. "I can work with direct. Let me be direct in return. My son has a condition, not a flaw, a condition. His nervous system processes the world differently. This has made him at times difficult to protect, because the things that regulate him are not the things I can provide inside the structure of this family." Queen said nothing. She had learned that silence was a room, that people who weren't used to being in it would fill it. Dante filled it. He is also the only thing I have left that I love without condition. Something moved in his face, brief, controlled, gone almost before it arrived. Which makes him the point of maximum exposure. Are you understanding what I'm telling you, Miss Okafor? You're telling me your son is your greatest vulnerability, she said, and you're not sure whether I'm a threat to that. He looked at her for a long, measuring moment. Are you? No. Then what are you? I'm a dance therapist. I run a program that helps people whose nervous systems are overwhelmed by the world. Learn to regulate through movement. Your son came to me voluntarily, made progress that is visible and consistent, and has not once behaved in any way that indicates manipulation, exploitation, or agenda. She folded her hands on the table. And I would argue that surveilling me, reviewing my lease, and using my grant funding as a background threat is a more aggressive act than anything I've done. Silence. The kind that had teeth. Then Dante did something she had not expected. He picked up his tea. He drank it. He set it down. The lease review was routine due diligence. It was not a threat. With respect, Mr. Park, from where I was sitting, it felt like one. I imagine it did. He looked at the table for a moment, the first time his eyes had moved off her face since she sat down. My son has not had a space outside of my management in 4 years, not since... He stopped. Reset. Not for some time. I have not always managed his access to the world well. I know this. It was not an apology, but it was an admission, and from a man like Dante she understood. Those were the same thing. Here is what I'm willing to offer, he said. The lessons continue. My team performs a standard security sweep of your studio once a week. They will not interfere with your sessions. They will not photograph or record within the space. They will not interact with your students. The vehicle outside your building remains. Those are my conditions. And mine, Queen said. Are that your men enter the studio only when it is empty and closed, no sweeps during operating hours, no contact with my students or their families, and no further investigation into my personal finances or housing? She met his eyes. I understand you love your son. So do the families of every child who comes through my door. I ask you to extend them the same respect you'd want for him. Another long silence. Dante's eyes were impossible to read. Not cold exactly, but deep, fathomlessly deep. The eyes of a man who had spent 60 years deciding things and was now, for perhaps the first time in a very long time, uncertain. Agreed, he said. She stood. She picked up her keys. Miss Okafor, he said before she reached the door. What do you see when you look at my son? She turned. She thought of June on the studio floor that first night. The long exhale, the shoulders releasing, the almost smile that finally completed itself. She thought of him at the door frame, saying not in here with the quiet certainty of a man staking claim to something small but irretrievable. I see someone who knows exactly who he is, she said. He's just never been given a room quiet enough to hear himself. She left. In the elevator, her hands shook, just briefly, just for 2 floors. She pressed them flat against the mirrored wall and breathed. She texted Amanda one word, done. Amanda's reply came back in 4 seconds. Proud of you. Now come eat something. You look like a woman who hasn't had Jollof in 3 weeks. She laughed in the empty elevator. She didn't know why it came out sounding like relief. Istat. If this story is hitting different, if you feel Queen's courage, if you understand June's silence, you're exactly who this channel was built for. Afro-Korean Stories TV tells the love stories that don't get told elsewhere. Subscribe right now. Share this with someone who needs to believe that connection across borders is real. And drop a comment. Whose side are you on? Queen, Yoon, or Dante? We read every single one. Now stay, because what's coming next will change everything you think you know about this story. December. The break-in. It was a Thursday in December when the world she had carefully negotiated broke open. June arrived at 7 as usual. He was quieter than normal. Not his calm quiet, but a tighter, compressed quiet. The kind that comes before something finally breaks through the surface. But she noticed it in the first 5 minutes, but didn't press. She put on the session music, cleared the center of the floor, and let the work speak first, the way she always did. They were 20 minutes in, working on a partner sequence designed to build trust responses in the body, the kind of movement that required following someone else's lead without losing your own axis. When his phone, set on silent near the door, began vibrating with enough persistence to be visible from across the room. He stopped moving. He looked at the phone. The name on the screen. Even from a distance, Queen couldn't read it. But whatever it was turned something in June's face, from compressed to drained. You need to take that, she said. It's... He pressed his mouth closed. Looked at her. It's my father's head of security, Namjoon. If he's calling directly, something... Take it. He picked it up. He listened for 40 seconds. His face in those 40 seconds did several things. First, sharp, immediate focus, the kind she hadn't seen before. Live focus, the focus of a person whose brain locks onto real information with precision. Then, something adjacent to fear. Then, decision. Clear and final. He hung up. Queen, I need you to lock the studio back entrance right now. She was already moving before the sentence ended. Not because she always obeyed instructions, but because his voice, stripped of every performance, carried an authority she hadn't heard from him before. She crossed the room, bolted the back door, and turned around. What's happening? 3 men outside. They arrived in the last 6 minutes. Different vehicle from my father's team. Namjoon's people spotted them from the street. He believes they're from the Choi faction. He was scanning the room with that live, precise focus. Windows, exits, corners. They've been tracking my pattern here, 2 weeks minimum. They know the schedule. Queen's heart was doing something loud and unhelpful. She controlled her breathing. Your father's men are outside? 4 of them, already engaging. But if these men have a secondary access, the back alley, the side stairs... He moved to the far wall and pressed it. Behind a fold in the painted mural, a breaker box, and beside it, a heavy bolt she'd never paid attention to. He checked it. Locked. My students, Queen said. There are 2 in the back room, Mina and Seo-jun. They're practicing on their own. I need to get to them. Go. I'll hold the front. Jun, go. She moved to the back room. The 2 teenagers inside, Mina, 16, and Seo-jun, 14, looked up from their phones with the bafflement of people whose reality hadn't yet been updated. We're going to move to the inner practice corner, Queen said, her voice low and steady. Come with me now. Leave your bags. Honey, what? Now, Mina, it's okay. Come. She had them in the corner behind the large wooden storage unit before they heard it. A voice raised in confrontation from the front of the studio, the particular frequency of men whose patience had expired. And then quiet. And then footsteps. And then the front door opening, and Jun's voice. It's over. Namjoon's team has all 3 of them. We're clear. Mina grabbed Queen's hand. Queen squeezed it. Her pulse was somewhere in her throat. She walked back into the main studio. Jun was standing near the center of the floor. One of his jacket's buttons was missing, the only evidence that anything physical had occurred. His breathing was controlled. His expression was the post-crisis calm of a brain built for exactly this kind of singular pressure. He looked at her across the room. Everyone okay? Everyone's okay, she said. He nodded once. He sat down on the floor, not collapsing, choosing. The way a person sits when they've done the thing that needed doing and can now afford to feel what they pushed aside to do it. Queen sent Mina and Seo-jun home in the studio's emergency contact cab, called their parents herself, kept her voice clean and even throughout. When she came back, Jun was still on the floor with his back against the bar, eyes closed. She sat down across from him. Your father is going to be here in 10 minutes, she said. Namjoon called while I was on the phone. I know. Are you ready for that? No, but it's happening either way. She nodded. They sat together in the warm, scuffed studio and didn't talk. There was a particular grace to the silence between them now, earned and specific. The silence of people who have been through something and come out the other side still recognizing each other. Queen, he said. Yeah. I don't know how to do what you do, he said. Move through the world the way you do without... He gestured vaguely. All of this around you. I grew up in rooms where everyone else held the language and I was supposed to absorb it by proximity. I never did. I just... He looked at the floor. Performed absorbing it. A long pause. You're the first person who didn't ask me to perform. She felt the sentence land in the specific place in her chest, reserved for things that are true and irreversible. I know, she said quietly. I wanted to tell you that, he said, before he gets here, because once he's here, I'll have to be someone else again. And I wanted you to know, the person in this room right now. This is the actual one. The door opened. Dante came in. He looked at his son on the floor. He looked at Queen sitting across from him. He looked at the studio, the mural, the warm light, the 2 people in the center of the floor who hadn't stood up when he arrived and weren't going to. And something in Dante's face, on this man who had never in his public life been seen to hesitate, hesitated. He crossed the room. He sat down on the floor beside his son. It was an act so inconsistent with everything Queen knew of him that for a moment she genuinely didn't recognize him. "Appa." "I know," Dante said. His voice, stripped of the boardroom and 40 years of command, was a lower, quieter thing. "I know. Don't say anything yet." He looked at his son, and Queen watched the face of a man who had built an empire and understood, perhaps for the first time in 4 years, that the most expensive thing he'd purchased with it was distance. "When your mother was dying," Dante said, "you sat in the hospital chair for 6 days, and you didn't cry. Not once. And I thought it meant you weren't feeling it. I thought it meant I needed to teach you to feel." He stopped, swallowed. "I spent 4 years trying to teach you how to feel something you were already feeling, in ways I was too rigid to understand." June said nothing. His hands were very still in his lap. "I'm sorry," Dante said. "I don't know how to say it better than that. I'm sorry." The studio was very quiet. Outside, somewhere below, a car door closed. "I know, Appa," June said. His voice was the voice of someone who had been waiting a long time to have something confirmed, and was now, finally, able to exhale around it. "I know." They sat on the floor of a dance studio in Seoul, a woman from Lagos, an heir who'd been suffocating, and the man who had built the walls. And for several minutes, none of them moved. Dini or January. The revelation. Here is what Queen did not know, what the story had been building toward in the dark. In the seams of every conversation, every surveilled lesson, every careful word Dante had chosen and not chosen. She found out on a Friday morning in January. Amanda came over. She had that laptop again, that specific expression, the one she wore when she'd discovered something and had been sitting with it for hours, deciding how to say it. "Tell me," Queen said. "The grant," Amanda said. "The Korean Arts and Wellness Foundation grant. The one that brought you here. I was going through the renewal paperwork and I cross-referenced the foundation's board of directors." She turned the laptop around. Park Dante's name was the third on the list. The silence was not like any of the silences that had come before. This one was cold, specific. "He was on the board when they approved your grant," Amanda said. 18 months ago, before the gala, before June." Queen read the names, read them again. "That doesn't mean he knew. He abstained from the vote," Amanda said, "which means he was present for it. His name is on the attendance record. He saw your proposal. He saw your name. Before the gala ever happened." The city outside was continuing its routine existence with remarkable indifference to what Queen was currently experiencing in her chest. A bus went by. A child on a bicycle rang a bell. "You think he engineered this?" Queen said. Not a question. "I don't know what I think," Amanda said. "I think you need to ask him, and I think you need to ask June if he knew." June didn't know. "How are you certain?" Queen opened her mouth. She closed it. The certainty she'd arrived at before the question landed was now less certain. She walked to the window. She pressed her forehead against the glass. Did it matter? If Dante had seen her grant application and seen something in her work, something that made him think she could be of use to his son, did that make the last 4 months a transaction? Did it make June's progress a product? Did it make the night on the studio floor, the three of them sitting in the aftermath of something real, a performance after all? She felt the question move through her and leave marks. She called June. He answered on the second ring, as always. "Queen, did you know your father was on the grant board?" A silence. Longer than she expected, much longer than she could survive without its meaning something. "June." He stopped. "As I found out 2 weeks ago. Namjoon mentioned it in passing. I don't think he realized I didn't know. I've been trying to find the right way." 2 weeks. Her voice was level. It cost her. You've known for 2 weeks and you said nothing. I didn't know how to say it without it. Without it what? Without it changing things? She pressed a hand to her sternum. June, you told me you don't want me walking into things blind. You said it to my face, and then you kept this. I know. The word landed like he'd been carrying it. I know, Queen. I was afraid. Of what? That if you knew. His voice broke at its edge, not dramatically, quietly, the way genuinely fragile things break. That if you knew, you'd decide the whole thing wasn't real, that I wasn't real, that we were just my father's arrangement. A breath. Oh, and I couldn't go back to being an arrangement. Not after this. She stood at the window with her phone pressed against her ear and felt the full weight of what the last 4 months had cost both of them. She felt the rage, real and clarifying, and underneath it, something more complicated. The impossible arithmetic of a man who was both the reason she was here and the reason she would have chosen to be here, not knowing which truth was true. I need time, she said. I know. Don't call me. I'll call you. She hung up. Amanda was sitting on the couch with her hands folded and her face doing the thing it did when she was respecting someone's pain without trying to fix it. Was it real? Queen asked her. Not about June. About all of it. Amanda thought about it, honestly. I think, she said, well, that a man can be the instrument of something and not be the architect of it. And I think you already know the difference between those two things. You just need to decide if it matters. 9 days. She did not call for 9 days. In those 9 days, she taught her classes. She worked on the grant renewal. She sat with the foundation paperwork and looked at Dante's name on the board until it was just letters on a page. She called her mother in Lagos. Not to talk about June. Just to hear a voice that had known her longest. Her mother said, Queen, you always make the complicated thing harder by carrying it alone. Ask the people involved. Stop making decisions for them before you've heard them out. Her mother was, as always, efficiently correct. On the 9th day, she called Dante. I have a question, she said. I want an honest answer. Yes, he said. Did you approve my grant because you thought I could help June? A pause. The honest kind. Not manufacturing an answer, but finding the most accurate words for something true. No, he said. I abstained from that vote specifically because I did not want my personal interest to influence it. Your grant was approved entirely on the merit of your work. Another pause. I will not pretend that when I researched the gala guest list and found your name, I didn't see the connection. I did, and I allowed it to develop. Not because I engineered it, but because I saw what it was doing for my son, and I chose not to stop it. That's still control, she said. Yes, he said. It is. I am aware of that. Did June know before 2 weeks ago? No. I told no one. Namjoon's disclosure was an accident. A beat. I would have told June eventually, when I found the right way to explain the difference between engineering and allowing. I haven't found it yet. The difference, Queen said, is that engineering removes choice. Allowing leaves it. Silence. I chose this, she said. Every Thursday, every Tuesday, I chose it, and June chose it. And you could have ended it at any point, with that lease, with the grant, with a single phone call, and you didn't. She let that sit for a moment. That matters. I need you to know that it matters. But I also need you to know, the next time you decide to allow something that affects my life, you tell me, directly. Because I'm not a variable in your management system. I'm not an arrangement. I'm a person who made a choice. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Understood, he said. And it was the most unadorned thing she had ever heard from him. She said goodbye and sat with the aftermath of the conversation until it settled. Then she texted June. Studio, tomorrow, 7 p.m. His reply came back in seconds. "I'll be there." From 0. He arrived exactly at 7. He was not wearing a suit. He was wearing the kind of clothes a person wears when they have decided not to perform anything. Dark trousers, a simple dark shirt, his hair not perfectly arranged. He looked nervous. He looked real. She had the music already low, the lights warm, the floor clear. He stepped inside. He didn't try to explain or apologize immediately. He stood near the door and looked at her, and waited for whatever she needed. "I'm angry," she said. "I want you to know that. Not past tense. Present. I'm still angry." "Okay," he said. "You kept something from me that affected my ability to make an informed decision about my own life. That's not something I can move past cleanly, because trust isn't something I rebuild fast. I want you to understand what you cost." He held her gaze. He did not look away. "I understand." "Good." She crossed the room. She stood in front of him, close but not touching. "I'm also not done," she said. "I'm angry and I'm also not done. Do you understand what I mean by that?" Something moved through him, relief and its opposite simultaneously, the peculiar condition of receiving something precious while knowing you almost lost it. "Yes," he said. "I'm not done because what happened between us in this studio was real. How the work was real. You were real. And I'm not willing to let your father's complexity or your fear erase what was real." Her voice was steady. It had cost her to make it steady. "But we do this honestly from here. Whatever this is, we do it with everything on the table. No protecting me from things I deserve to know. No holding information because you're afraid of what it does to us." She held his gaze. "Afraid is not a reason." "Afraid is not a reason," he repeated. Like a rule he was committing to memory. "Right." He reached out, slowly, deliberately, and took her hand. Not dramatically, just held it, the way he'd been learning to hold movement, without grasping, without forcing, with just enough presence to communicate, "I'm here." "I'm sorry," he said. "Not because it's what you need to hear. Because I mean it." She looked at their hands, at the studio behind him, the mural, the warm light, the 9 weeks of history in these walls. "I know," she said. She put on the music. She stepped back. "We start from 0, she said. He almost smiled, and this time it made it all the way, exactly the way it had in the beginning. And she felt the symmetry of it somewhere in her chest like a door opening. "From 0, he said. They danced. 6 months later, Queen's studio expanded. A second room, larger, with better acoustics, opened specifically for the neurodivergent youth program she had piloted in the corner of the first. It ran 3 days a week. It had 14 students, 3 assistant instructors, and a waiting list. It had been funded, quietly and specifically, by a private endowment attached to no public name. And she knew whose it was. She did not broadcast it. Some gifts deserved to be given without transaction. June came twice a week as a volunteer instructor. He was good at it, better than good. He had a particular gift for the students who processed instructions differently, who needed movement shown rather than described, who shut down under pressure and opened up under patience. He was, Queen had observed, extremely patient. She suspected this had always been true. No one had previously provided him an environment where patience was the asset. Their relationship was not simple. It was not the kind of story that irons itself flat into a clean conclusion. Dante was still Dante, still vast and controlling and learning with the particular slowness of a man relearning gravity, that loving his son and managing his son were not the same act. June was still navigating the loneliness of being an heir in a family built for legacies rather than individuals. Queen was still negotiating what it meant to build a life in a city that was not hers, in a language she was learning but did not yet dream in, beside a man whose world carried weight she would never fully inherit. But weight, she had learned, does not have to be carried alone. It does not have to be hidden in the back room of a life. It does not have to be performed away or managed into silence. It can be brought into a room with warm light and scuffed floors and music that moves between Lagos and Seoul without asking permission. And it can be set down, not forever, but long enough to remember that the person carrying it is more than the weight they hold. On a Tuesday evening in June, when the last student had gone home and the studio was quiet, June found an old song on her phone. Something she'd played that very first Thursday, a Gaya-Guillaume line braided into West African strings. And he played it without asking. She was wiping down the bar. She stopped. He extended his hand. The gesture was identical to the gala. Same hand, same angle, same offer, but everything inside it was different, earned and present and unguarded in the way that only time makes possible. She crossed the room. She took his hand. They danced in the empty studio with no audience and no performance and no weight that needed to be lifted or carried or survived. Just movement between two people who had chosen each other, imperfectly, painfully, honestly, and kept choosing, which is the only way choosing means anything at all. And somewhere in the city, in a tower in Gangnam, Dante sat with a photograph of his wife and looked at it for a long time. He did not speak to it. He simply looked, the way a man looks at something that anchors him to who he was before he became only what he controlled. Then he set it down. He picked up his phone. He called his son. June, breathless from dancing, answered on the second ring. "Are you well?" Dante asked. A pause. Not hesitation. Surprise. The good kind. "Yes," June said. "I am." "Good," said Dante. And then, with the effort of a man lifting something he'd put down a long time ago, "That's all I wanted to know." He hung up. On the other side, June looked at the phone in his hand and then looked at Queen, Betty, who had watched the entire exchange from 2 feet away with her arms folded and her head tilted and an expression that was entirely too knowing to be comfortable. "Your father?" she said. "Yeah." "What did he want?" June thought about it. "To know if I was okay," he said, like he was still processing the novelty of it. Queen unfolded her arms. She stepped forward. She straightened the collar of his shirt with 2 precise fingers. "And are you?" He looked at the studio, at the mural, at the woman in front of him whose Grant had crossed an ocean and whose hands had taught him that a body at rest is not a body defeated. It is a body choosing when to move. "Yes," he said. "For the first time in a long time. Yes." She nodded once, the way she always nodded when something was settled. She turned back to the floor. She held out her hand over her shoulder without turning around. He took it. The music played. The light held. Outside, Seoul continued its vast, indifferent, beautiful motion. And inside a small studio in AMBW, 2 people who had no business finding each other danced like they had always known the way. And that is what love across cultures actually looks like. Not perfect, not easy, but real, earned, chosen. If this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it made you believe, then you already know you belong here. Afro-Korean Stories. TV is built for everyone who knows that the heart doesn't carry a passport. Subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to feel it. Leave us a comment. Tell us what hit you hardest, what you wish you'd seen more of. Tell us your own story. We believe every border love has ever crossed deserves to be told. Until the next story, don't stop crossing the distance. The Weight of His Name, written for Afro-Korean Stories, TV. An original production. All characters are fictional.